Hello and welcome to Living Proof, the Isaac Newton Institute podcast. My name is Dan Aspel and I'm your host. In today's episode, I will be joined by Professor Herbert Gangl of the University of Durham. Professor Gangl is a number theorist, and it's this specialism which has led him on a journey to create 3D artworks and jewellery known as the Gems of Hypolytos. We'll find out all about them in just a moment. So, Herbert Gangl, thank you very much for joining me and welcome to Living Proof.
A pleasure.
And for a way of introduction for the listeners, you are attending INI as a participant at the moment. Can you tell us a little bit about the programme that you're part of?
It's about algebraic K-theory, algebraic cycles, and homotopy theory. So it's an kind of abstract form of dealing with objects that appear in areas like number theory and topology, and they blend into a nice, much more delicate theory. I don't even understand much of what's going on in some of the areas, I have to admit, so I'm coming from one side there, but of course it's very enriching to talk to those people who do.
Yeah, that's fab. And what is your specialism then, if I can ask? What do you spend most of your research time on?
It focuses around something called polylogarithms. So it's sort of a higher version of logarithms that you may have heard at school of. The exponents that one tends to look at. But it's sort of a more elaborate thing. Those objects turn out in many different areas in surprisingly unusual ways, and that's what I find very intriguing.
And it must be fabulous to have the opportunity to discuss these subjects with quite a large group of other people who have either the same specialism or adjacent specialisms, because I know how rare some of these subjects can be that are covered at INI.
That's right. You feel at your own institution often a bit isolated because no one's really exactly working in your area. So you want to talk to other people, and it can be a bit hard. And those programs are just great because you're forced to interact almost. I mean, you love to interact, of course, and then this gives you the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Is it your first time at INI?
No, I've been there before. I've even been part of of the organizing committee of a program 10 years ago, which went a little bit in this direction. At least my area intersected a little bit from a different angle, though. Well, it was great fun. And,
so you're a real veteran.
Well.
Again, by way of introduction to yourself, your home institution is Durham, I believe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that must be wonderful. It's a beautiful city, a nice place to live, I imagine.
Yeah, maybe city is a bit exaggerated as a term. It's more like a village, but it has a fantastic it's this World Heritage Site where you walk alongside the river, and you can see first the castle appear, and then you just in the 100 meters away from that, suddenly there's the cathedral, and that's for me my school walk kind of every day. So this is fantastic, and the whole city, the whole town is a bit still. Medieval in the sense that these cobblestone roads are sort of still narrow. It's fun. It's really fun to walk there.
That's such a delight. I know Durham a little, and you've painted a perfect picture of it there. And to come from there to Cambridge, which is also celebrated for its the beauty of its architecture. What a lovely mixture. What a lovely life to be an academic. God. I'm sure there are many other aspects which we haven't touched on. Yeah. So apart from your research and everything else in your life, there's one other thing which makes you unique and fascinating, and that is your creation of 3D artworks and jewellery based upon mathematics, which anyone who's been at INI over the past few weeks may have seen your leaflets around the place on the coffee tables and such, and they looked so intriguing that it was impossible not to want to talk to you about them, Herbert. So for someone who has no idea what we're talking about at all, give us a little introduction. What are these things that you make?
So they originally arose from my master's thesis, even, which on the continent is a bit more extended. And it deals with, how can I start to formulate it? It deals with visualizations of group actions. So groups are kind of mathematical objects that try to capture symmetry. So we feel what symmetry is, but it's hard maybe to quantify that notion. And mathematicians have found ways to deal with that. And there's this notion of a group. Then you have a space, and the group may be acting on the space. So it does something to the space. It carries a point around, and you want to see things like orbits under that group action. So very vague, like planetary orbits around the sun would be concentric circles, and they nicely sort of divide a plane into non-intersecting bits. In a similar way, you have these orbits sort of cutting your space into nicely. They cut your space. They partition your space nicely. As a two-dimensional analog, maybe tilings on your wall, on your bathroom wall, or like Escher's paintings have with angels and demons, for instance. They tile the plane very nicely. So that's what people tend to have seen before. So that's maybe a good impression to start with. And then we think of that as a three-dimensional version of it, but not in our usual way of thinking about geometry, which is the so-called Euclidean way. It's more what's called the hyperbolic geometry. And for those bits that I'm interested in, or have been interested in that thesis, hyperbolic geometry seems to be richer. So those tilings, so three-dimensional tilings, which come actually from number theory, which is where I originally came from, we have infinitely many different ones. And as it turns out, in many cases, there is a beautiful subdivision of the orbit space. So space of orbits means you take one representative for each of those orbits you have, and they tend to form a nice, or you can choose them appropriately, and then they decompose into a finite number of convex polytopes. So now, long story short, one of those polytopes that arise from such a tessellation is what goes into my jewellery typically.
So you've given a fantastic background there of the mathematics which led you to these items, but you were obviously so inspired by the shapes, by the symmetries, as you've put it, of what you were working with, that you I guess, am I right in saying that you wanted to sort of give them visual life? You wanted to turn these into objects. And when you turned them into objects, was that purely to see them in physical form, or was it to make something which was beautiful in the way that artwork is beautiful, or was it specifically to make something which could be worn as jewellery? How did your thinking go there?
In the beginning, I was just happy to have something tangible that would show the structure that seemed to appear on paper and with first crude images, approximations of that. It showed kind of symmetry that was unexpected. We were able, with several students over summer projects, research projects, to make that more visible. And then eventually it turned out that there was an easy way to put all those points of the vertices of such polytopes, so take the convex hull of the vertices, and those all were lying on a sphere, and it had no obvious reason to do so. And that was the big surprise. And not only that, but also the vertices were nicely poised in the sense of they were nicely distributed on the sphere. So both of which were not at all obvious. And that created such a feeling of beauty, I think. So it's this well-poisedness and the symmetry, the reappearing of structures if you turn the object and you realize, I've seen that before, so I only need to understand that part because that will reappear. So I think that those emotions kind of tend to blend together to some kind of feeling of aesthetics, beauty. And eventually I produced them even with my own 3D printer, but in plastic. And that was very nice. And I realized that one could even have them done in metal. It was already a step further. And then I didn't even think about precious metal. But eventually, when I saw that it was still affordable, and this 3D printing company, Shapeways, they really do a great job there. They could actually produce my wireframe models of those polytopes without too much problem, also in very small size and in precious metal. Then I thought that's a kind of an object that people might be interested in wearing.
I wonder if you can speak to this at all, but do you think that you're fortunate in your sphere of mathematics that what you're working with can be rendered into these aesthetically pleasing shapes, or do you think that in most schools and areas of mathematics there is something that could be interpreted this way? Is it unique to your research?
I think it's really hard to actually find something like that. It was very fortuitous that it happened to have this structure. So you need to work with three-dimensional objects. That's already a subclass, and they need to have something that produces a type of object that's not really well known. There are these 5 platonic solids, of which you may have seen lots and lots of avatars. Certainly 3D printing models are out there in like tons. So you would like to have something that's different. And I was lucky enough to get those. Funnily, there is a different way of tessellating those, the same space, almost the same object, but slightly different, smaller groups that a colleague of mine did. And he only found that the building blocks there consisted of, I think, 8 or 9 different types. So I was lucky to really have many more appear.
Well, that's really inspiring to hear. It must be a really privileged feeling to see a physical rendering of your work, of something that otherwise was existing internally. Is that reasonable to say?
That's absolutely true. In the beginning, I saw it on screen, so with a CAD program, and actually, it was so pleasing that I spent like hours turning the object and playing around with them. And then I thought, okay, I need some physical object to do that. Now, solid ones would actually not be as nice, or they look very good in solid form on the screen, but it's much nicer to have the wireframe model so that you can see behind or through the model. And also, it's much cheaper in terms of 3D printing. So I was kind of led by circumstances to produce those models, and eventually settled on something that I felt that was pleasing.
And I actually don't know anyone myself that owns a 3D printer, but I hear about them lots. That's quite a thrilling thing, and what an interesting use you've put it to. Is it an easy device to learn to use or to master?
Actually, I was again fortunate that in the beginning I didn't have any problem with it. Eventually, problems appear, and then you need some kind of engineering qualities, which I didn't have. I mean, as mathematicians, you tend to have, you're a klutz in terms of those bits, and I was, but I learned my lesson, and eventually I got through, so I muddled through. But what I found actually really appealing is when you see the object emerge from the plastic. So you really feel like you are creating something. And it's amazingly satisfying. And to take it off your build plate in the end, once it's done, and you have it in your hand and you play around with it. Well, often you have to remove the support material because that's a bit, but that is maybe one of the most exciting parts of 3D printing, that you really do create. It feels like.
Yeah, it's rare, I imagine, as a mathematician, that you have such a practical experiment as well. Something that you have an absolute solid result you can hold. That's really, really fascinating to hear. So obviously then you stepped from having created those and been satisfied and excited by that to making them more precious by making them quite literally out of precious metals. How big a step was that? Did they sort of somehow take on a different characteristic, a different character, once you'd had them made out of other materials?
I would think so. So the first time I opened one of those boxes, they have pouches. Shapeways send you those bits, the models often in pouches, black pouches. So I took it out, and it really struck me how beautiful it was. You can see it on screen before, but it's no match. Once you have it in your hand, I think that was a little bit of a transformational moment, and that triggered the desire to make more and more of those. I have dozens of different types of those models. Try to play around with them, try to modify them, and in order to wear them, you don't want them too round, because maybe they bobble away. So I squeezed them, and I found different pleasing ways of presenting them as well. So then I thought, okay, there is some artwork to be done. So I have the artistic freedom to change them in ways that are not exactly mathematical, but are more kind of pleasing to the eyes.
And we are speaking online at the moment, but we did see each other in person a couple of days ago, and I had the privilege of holding some of these in my hand, and they were very intricate and very beautiful, and of varying shapes. Some were spheres, some slightly more condensed shapes, and looking at them, the more I looked, the more detail there seemed to be, and the more I noticed the symmetry and the interesting aspects of it. So that's something which really leapt out at me. What sort of response have you got generally from people that you've showed them to? Is it particular to mathematicians, or has anybody, regardless of their specialty, noticed the beauty here or found interest in them?
I was actually surprised. Originally, I thought that will be appealing to mathematicians, so a very small subset. But then, whenever I show it to people, my sister, for instance, she has nothing to do with mathematics whatsoever. She was very pleased, and she is still excited. She even wears sometimes some of that jewelry. Many other people that I've shown them to tend to be very positive about them. And often they ask or suggest that I should make a business out of it. So they seem to think that there is enough beauty to show them around.
And you do sell them, and you have a website, I believe, that people can.
There is a website. So Shapeways allows you to put up a store, but somehow the PR from Shapeways, they don't do PR, so you have to do it yourself, and I haven't done a good job at all so far. So there's not much going on.
Is there anywhere that listeners could point their browser at to see at least images of
yes, so on Shapeways, one would need to maybe search for the gems of Hypolytos, and then that would be probably my shop that will appear.
Excellent. So gems of Hypolytos on Shapeways. Excellent. That'll all be in the episode description as well, because I realise that this is an audio medium, and it's it's difficult to describe jewellery to people without using an awful lot of words. But yeah, various shapes, sizes, colours, and I'm guessing that they can be worn in various ways as well. Do you have? Is there any particular part of the body or area? Rings, earrings. What kind of thing do you focus on?
I've tried different types, as bracelets, as rings, as necklaces, which is maybe the bulk of the jewelry that I'm making, and some of them are just for decoration. Like then, if they're round and bigger, then you don't want to wear them, but rather put them on a shelf, maybe. Earrings can be worn as well. What I haven't done yet is cufflinks.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a good one, yeah. Tell me, what's the significance of gems of Hypolytos? What is the significance of the name?
It's so play on words. So it comes from hyperbolic polytopes. And blending those turn out to give something that sounds like a Greek name. Indeed, there were Greek, I think, philosophers, maybe Hypolytos, which are very close in, at least with the sound. So I thought maybe this has a certain appeal to people. If I have such a name and put them together with like gems, I even produced a little legend that would put a certain Hypolytos who envisaged those bits to the game. Originally, I hoped that this would be an important factor for Shapeways, but I don't think anyone really cares. I even invented poems to describe the beauty of those objects, and they're there on Shapeways, but again, it hasn't yet.
Oh gosh, well, I'll certainly go and read those. That sounds fascinating to look at poems that you've written in honour of these artworks. I guess I had another question, which was that, to me, there's a lot of various ways in which jewellery and other art objects can be beautiful. Symmetry, which you've mentioned, is one of those. So have you seen that there is a mathematical symmetry, perhaps by accident, in other jewellery designed by other people, which was meant only to be beautiful and not with no mathematical underlying design to it, but which has still somehow followed some of these principles?
Not as such. I mean, originally, for my own jewelry, there was this surprising appearance of symmetry. So there was a hidden symmetry that I wouldn't have guessed, certainly not from formulas or from what you get there. But then when you picture them, as one of my students did, there was a kind of symmetry lurking in the background. And once that was in place, another student was able to make that manifest. There was an urge to maybe have, or there was even a suggestion that there should be a theorem saying that under certain circumstances, there should be, that those points that I mentioned earlier would all lie on a sphere. That was the big surprise there. When I told that to my former doctoral supervisor, he said, "Oh, so maybe if you prove that theorem, then that would be the first mathematical theorem that would be motivated by jewellery." Perhaps that goes a bit in the direction of your question, that can actually use the physical object to deduce something that you haven't seen before. In a sense, that's maybe the best that I can do.
That's absolutely fascinating. What an interesting number of doors this path you followed seems to have opened, ways in which you wouldn't have been able to foresee beforehand. How fascinating. How long has this journey been going on? How many years have you been making these gems?
Actually, the thesis was already done in 89, so centuries ago. And the jewellery stuff came, I think, in 2012. There were the first inklings where I realized that you can make those 3D printed objects. It was the beginning of Shapeways as well. And from my side, I started in 2016 when I had my first, when I bought my first printer. In the meantime, I have 3 of them. Currently, 2 of them are not working because they need technical difficulties. And since then, I've been churning out print after print for a while. It's great fun.
That's fabulous. Well, it's been really interesting to talk to you about these, Herbert. And for listeners, again, any of the links which we've mentioned will be in the episode description, so you can go and you can see. When we post this on the Newton Institute website, we'll put some pictures in as well, so you can see them there, some images of the jewellery. And Herbert, thank you again. I hope that you're looking forward to the rest of your time at INI in this particular visit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I hope it goes well for you. So thank you very much again for your time. I have really enjoyed talking to you.